Hello, friends. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Elliot Parker, and whether you're a writer, a reader, or just a lover of words, I invite you to stop what you're doing and join me for a page break. And joining us for a page break today is debut author Donna Rowell, and she is here to talk to us about her brand new mystery thriller book. It's called Never Name the Dead. So I'm so excited to talk to her about that. But before we introduce Donna and talk about her excellent book, I wanted to remind you, if this is your first time here on Page Break, welcome. We're glad to have you. We invite you to look for that red subscribe button over here in the lower left-hand corner for you, lower right-hand corner for me, and please click subscribe. We will put all of the information about Donna and links to where you can find out more information about her and her books in the description box below. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for that. If you're watching us on Instagram, welcome, and please be sure that you like the video and list some comments there on Instagram, and then hop over to YouTube and make Page Break a regular viewing habit for your YouTube preferences. We're delighted to have you as we are now over 1,700 subscriptions strong and growing. So thanks to everybody for being a part of the channel, and for everybody that is a repeat viewer who has been with us since the beginning, thank you. And for those folks that are new to the channel, welcome. We're glad to have you. And we're very glad to have Donna Rowell with us today. She comes from a long line of Kiowa storytellers, and that factors in heavily to her book, Never Name the Dead. She spent a 32-year career spinning stories for Silicon Valley startups and corporations. She's also an award-winning and nominated producer and writer on several documentaries, including one called Vanishing Link, My Spiritual Return to the Kiowa Way, which was seen on PBS, and it was winner of the Trail Dance 2007 Best Oklahoma Documentary Award. She started a new chapter after that by writing mysteries, and this is her debut mystery book called Never Name the Dead. And she shares that connection in her books about her Plains Indian tribe, the Kiowas, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. And right now, she also enjoys life in California with her partner of 37 years, their son, and a feral gray cat. There always has to be a gray cat involved in the story somewhere. So, Donna, welcome to Page Break. So glad to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I got to make one quick correction. It's Rowell, just like Rowell.
Oh, got you. Okay, very good. Yes.
And
Thank
then,
you for correcting that. I want to make sure I get that right. So Donna
and
Rowell is joining us.
thank you.
Her writer's alias could be Rowell, I guess.
Which is how I usually hear it. And there's also Kiowa is the tribe.
Oh, Kiowa, got you. Very good. Very good. Excellent. Yes. And if I mispronounce Kiowa, which I probably will, please forgive me.
No problem. I just got to make sure that that I do get the correct pronunciation out there.
I totally understand, and thank you for letting me know both of those things. So Donna, I wanted to ask you, your book is terrific. Can I have you hold it up for us? Because I love the cover. Yeah. The cover is beautiful. It is just, look at that. Never Name the Dead. It was published by Crooked Lane Books. Just a spectacular cover, and it hides a wonderful story. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your book, because I know as we talked about Kiowa and the tribe and that part being such a significant part of your life, it really started for you as a child, that whole connection when you were kind of influenced and introduced to the culture by your grandfather. Can you tell us a little bit about him and what that was like, having him expose you to some of the beliefs and traditions of the culture there?
Oh, I was so lucky to be born in, well, both sides of the family I have. I'm very fortunate. But on my father's side is my grandfather, C.E. Rowell. He did a lot of the art. In fact, sitting right on my shoulder here is one of his portraits. But Grandpa, the tribe historian, and he was a recognized tribal elder. You know, there's always elders in a tribe, but a recognized tribal elder is recognized by the tribe as having a specialty that they all recognize. And for Grandpa, he was our calendar reader. So he wasn't only just an artist, he also read, we have 4 different calendars, the Dohasan and Anko being our primary ones. And they document significant events through the Kiowas for the last, 200 years roughly. And my grandfather was one of the last readers. So growing up with him was just an amazing treat. I mean, someone will ask me who's your favorite author, and I have to say I changed that to my favorite storyteller. And my grandfather was just a master storyteller. He would enchant us with stories straight from the calendar, and you know, the historical deeds and people would start coming alive, and then he would include his paintings, because most of his paintings ended up being like snapshots from the calendars as well. So I was extremely lucky to grow up with him and what he knew, and I became his shadow early on. So I was really fortunate, and he let me follow him around a lot of his friends, and I heard so many stories from so many of our old ones. And when I got into 40s, every time I got laid off from a job, I went back to Oklahoma and I would spend a few weeks recording elders in our tribe. And I've just got some priceless stories from the ones that grew up with grandparents that were first on the reservation or had never lived on a reservation. Just amazing stories. Each of these elders, just incredible. Just so honored that they chose to talk to me and let me record it so that the future Kiowas would have something to look back. I just really a blessed childhood.
Fantastic. That's terrific. And I love hearing you talk about that. And I know it's important to you just by hearing the passion and the love that you speak of those memories. And I did want to ask you before we get into your book, that experience of your grandfather telling stories and those elders of the Kiowas telling you stories. What did you learn as you look back and you think about all those stories you were told? And now that you're a writer yourself, what did you learn about narrative, about storytelling itself, the craft of it, by listening to all of those stories get told to you over the years?
Oh, what a great question. And what I learned, and being a reader as well, is that the best authors are the best storytellers. And you just get lost in the passion of story. And it's the storyteller is so passionate about what they're telling as well. You can't help but just into the story. I was lucky not just having grandpa as a storyteller, but I had several of his sisters and his brother alive through most of my childhood. So I got to see them in a gathering doing a storytelling. And one of the things that stood out to me is the rhythm in a story. And it was seemed very natural to my elders, my grandfather and his sisters and brothers, of coming and being a cliffhanger and then pausing to let us all soak in that moment of a cliffhanger and then moving onward. So I think they brought a special rhythm to my stories, and I think that when I write, I do it thinking that rhythm. I really think of it as more of an oral storytelling as I'm going through writing my story. There's certain places in the book that I've actually hear the drums going and keeping that pattern going for me throughout a scene or two. So I think that what they brought to me mostly was just, gosh, experiencing how a good story is told and trying to do that myself. But very much, I do believe my my writing isn't to everyone's taste, because it does do follow the rhythm of an oral storytelling. But I joke about, I think I was just born to be a storyteller, and I looking with who I come from, definitely one of the things I used to love to do is gather up all the nieces, nephews, and kids around and tell stories by the fire, and just keep them entertained through an evening. Um, my poor son, as we're currently in California, well, we've lived in California for a long time. He's when my son was younger, I used to take many of my grandfather's paintings to his class and introduce them to what an Indian is today and what they were like in the past, and use my grandfather's paintings to help paint stories for the kids. And just watching the faces, that helps you with the timing of your stories. I think being able to see your audience, and the kids are so wonderful because you can see when you've got them, and you just watch that light in their eyes as their imagination is running wild. And for me, that's the greatest accomplishment. Somebody sinks into a story and their imagination takes over from there.
That's fantastic. I love that, and I had not considered the children and sort of the nonverbal signs they give you in terms of their interest in stories. And if you think back to how so many of us were taught stories and heard stories, it was in elementary school or having our parents and grandparents read to us or tell us stories, and how kids' eyes just light up when they hear a great story that they just want to hear more about. I'm so glad you made that point. I think that's fantastic. And that leads me into my next question, which kind of deals with rhythm. And one of the things I loved about your book is that it is a mystery that takes place over the course of one day. And it has sort of a slow kind of pace to it, maybe that, as you mentioned a moment ago, not a lot of people would expect in a traditional mystery or thriller. But I really found that to be endearing about your book. And hearing you talk a little bit about how that's connected back to the Kiowa storytelling tradition is important. When you were writing the story, did you know from the beginning you were going to kind of take that slower pace, or did you try to write it as sort of a nail-biting, page-turning thriller and it just didn't work? How did that come together? How did you make that decision to kind of use the pacing that you did?
It really fell back into just what I grew up with, the storytellings of my childhood. And as I was writing it, I just truly went back to feeling the rhythm. And for me, I don't plan what I'm writing, kind of evolve chapter after chapter. I started with knowing who the murderer was and what the murder was. And then after that, I just sink into my story and I feel the rhythm coming and I just let it flow to that point. And about midway through, I'll start seeing my ending. And I aim for that. but yeah, I think that there's a rhythm that I do, I think in terms of a visual scene for each of the chapters I'm going through. And I think I try to tell that story as my character Mud is experiencing it.
And you mentioned Mud, who's a terrific character, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about her because we find out early in the story that the story takes place really in two places, in California and also in Oklahoma, where a lot of the central action of the plot takes place. But we learn that Mud has not really been, or she feels like she's not been accepted by the Kiowa tribe very much, and has not really been accepted by that culture. And so she flees to California. She starts her life there. Then she gets a call from her grandfather, kind of pulling her back to Oklahoma. But when she comes back to Oklahoma, she finds that the community and the tribe and the people that she left are going, or really undergoing, some challenges. What does she experience when she comes back? What's that homecoming like for her, and what's going on there on the lands that the Kiowa occupy when she gets to talking to some of the people that see her at the airport?
So for Mud, she's been gone for 10 years. And as you mentioned, one of the reasons that she left was to reclaim her identity as May, who becomes a professional in Silicon Valley. And that's how Silicon Valley becomes a tie-in with the story. What Mud does is once she arrives, she's called by her grandfather, who she will do anything for. And even though she's been gone for 10 years, she's still strongly connected to the tribe that she grew up with. But once she gets there, everything that she expected isn't there or happening. Her grandfather, who would normally meet her, isn't there, and she's pacing and waiting to find him. And strange enough, Kiowa legislators show up. You know, she has two or three people meet looking for her grandfather, which is very unusual in a small town environment. So she starts moving from being May, who's this professional attitude and person in Silicon Valley, and becoming Mud again in the first couple chapters of her book, as she starts recognizing who and what is taking place in the land. And what's going on is there's been a theft in the from the Kiowa tribe. The tribal museum has had a theft that they think that her grandfather committed. As that's going on, there's also signs that there's fracking going on in the back country, and her grandfather has been threatened by these frackers. Mud finally leaves and discovers that, you know, her grandfather is missing and being accused of these crimes, and then she discovers a body at her grandfather's house.
Excellent. And
So
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I started these books, I envisioned this, and one of the reasons it's such a brisk mystery taking place in that less than 24 hours, about an hour period, is because when I originally pitched the books, I pitched them as a 4-book series originally. And I see it as a 4-day vision quest, kind of like a Kiowa vision quest would usually take 4 days as somebody is trying to find their path on life. And so what I'm trying to do is have Mud do this 4 days, a murder a day in each book, as she tries to find a way to bring both her worlds back together so that she can find her path for her life. She may be successful in Silicon Valley, but she's left this half of her forgotten. And now it's time and a point in her life where the two need to come together and she needs to find her way. So the first book is less than 18 hours and the first day of her vision quest. One of the things that she does also do is she discovers a guide. She has an animal guide come to her through this and the start of her vision quest. She's not quite agreeing that she's on a quest yet, even though a buffalo and her grandfather is telling her so. So the second book actually will pick up about 15 minutes after the first ends. And it will be less than a 24-hour period as well as she goes to that next stage of her vision quest.
That's fantastic. I love that. I love that idea of another book in a mystery series or a thriller series picking up 15 minutes, just 15 minutes after the last resolution of the book. And when we certainly won't spoil the ending for our readers about how this one ends, but I love the fact that that picks up 15 minutes later. And I also love the fact that Mud is not alone. She reconnects when she comes back home with her cousin Denny. Can you tell us a little bit about him and what kind of relationship these two forge as they start to find out why the body was where it was and what's happened to Mud's grandfather?
Well, Denny is Mud's older cousin. And within the Kiowa tradition, there really is no word for cousin because in our culture, my brothers and sisters' kids are my kids as well. We are of the same flesh. So your cousins are your brothers and sisters. And Mud and Denny grew up with literally a gang of cousins. I think I have like 20 or 30 out there as how many cousins they're growing up with. And they're all, so Denny is essentially a big brother to Mud, but also her partner in crime. You know, Mud idolized Denny, followed him into trouble everywhere. Essentially, in the back of my mind, any adventure that started with Denny and Mud, trouble. So she idolized, but also at the same time, as you would do with family members, and pick up, you know, they've not seen each other for 10 years. So they pick up where they left off, but then they also, throughout the book, I think that they voice frustrations with their adult relationship. And as they come towards the end, they get closer to resolving and acknowledging how much they both mean to each other and have missed each other and the importance of each in their lives.
What kind of challenges does Mud face? And I don't want to ask you this to give too much away, but some of the challenges that she faces as she steps back into this culture, as she's trying to solve this murder and find her grandfather, the challenges she faces kind of getting reassimilated in Kiowa culture or having to kind of interact with those people that she kind of left behind for another life. What are some of the experiences and challenges that she has trying to navigate sort of this strata that she walked away from a number of years ago?
What I set Mud up as the odd man out. You know, she grew up as a curly-headed Kiowa, comes something I'm familiar with, but she grew up with, and this is happening a little bit in my tribe now, where, you know, if you don't quite look brown enough, are you Kiowa enough? And so, even though her elders have always respected and wanted, you know, if you have an ounce of Kiowa blood, you are Kiowa. She's facing a new generation that feels that, you know, I attribute it towards the Harry Potter syndrome, you know, pure bloods versus mud blood. And I try to give a inside glimpse of those type of inner workings and thoughts within the tribe. You know, there are some people that are a handful that see that she's Kiowa enough. And then there's the elders and being pushing back, saying, you know, is who she is, and that's the way the Kiowas, expect her to be, and that is being a Kiowa. If there's an ounce of blood, there's enough Kiowa to be Kiowa. So she's emotionally had that struggle herself. She took on a bit of I'm not Kiowa enough. And I think that led partly to why she left. And that's a big part of why she's coming back, is finding out, is she Kiowa enough to be Kiowa and a Silicon Valley professional? And how do you bring those two things together? But a key point was, I did want to bring out that insight with that there's our tribes fighting over those type of issues as well internally. I think being Indian, it's kind of funny, is when we came to California, I'm the only person or race where it's typically asked, so how much Indian are you? None of my Black friends, Mexican friends, white friends, none of them get asked that. The moment that you hear, oh, I'm Italian, you don't follow up with, how much Italian are you? But as an Indian, you do. And so I wanted to bring that out in the book as well. So I guess part of what I'm doing with the series is trying to share a lot of the Kiowa culture and our history, so we're not forgotten, and to honor my father and the tribe itself. But I also am not going to make them the perfect Kiowa tribe. This is also what's happening within the tribe. And that's, if you don't show struggles, you don't show growth.
Excellent. Excellent. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, we're going to come back to the book in just a second. But before we do that, I want to put you on the author hot seat. This is something that we do to every author that's on Page Break and takes a page break with us. We put them on the hot seat. We just ask them a series of questions just to get our audience engaged with you and to help them learn a little bit more about you. So you feel free to just respond in any way you want. If you want to give a one-word answer, that's fine. If you want to elaborate, that's fine as well. So first question on the hot seat is a writer-based question. If you had to give a new writer or a writer who is just getting started a piece of advice, what would you tell them?
Oh, just do it. My debut novel comes out in 60 plus because I didn't just do it earlier in my life. And maybe I wouldn't have had the same story or voice earlier in life, but I know that my fear of not being able to do something, not being able to tell a story, not being able to write that book, kept me from even trying. I wrote it in my mind, but I never let it go to paper. So do it. And to be very honest, the day I finished the book, the first draft, was the happiest moment of all. I mean, all this is wonderful. I don't want to take anything back. I mean, oh my gosh, I have a book. But writing that first draft was the wonderful feeling. I finally released the words and told my story. So if you're any writer just wanting to get started doing anything, do it. Just do it, and do it for yourself.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Okay. Your favorite color?
I got to say purple and green.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll let you have two. That's perfectly fine. Your favorite food?
Chocolate. Can I count that? Dark chocolate.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can never have enough chocolate, and never put chocolate on enough
It's
sweet.
my addiction. It's my addiction.
Absolutely. So if you had to pick between living in Oklahoma or California, which one would you pick?
Well, I've kind of picked it. My career has been here in California, but I yearn to be in Oklahoma so often and so much because I do miss the people and the tribe. And I feel like I go home every time I go back to Oklahoma. But I've kind of anchored myself in California. I have my son's now 30, and there's no way I can that far away from him. It's already 6 hours away. That's long enough. Wife is here. And darn, my feral cat is here. I can't leave her either.
Totally understand. Totally understand. So I wanted to ask you my next hot seat question is sort of related to your son and your cat. Which is easier to deal with, a teenage son or a feral cat?
The teenage son, my teenage son anyway, was so much easier than this feral cat. The first hour of every day, cat, which I have to remind her she's a street cat occasionally because she rejects the food I'll first offer her. But, my first hour is giving her her treats, giving her her breakfast, and then we have to brush and talk for a while. Then she'll turn her tail and be off and gone. Yeah, definitely the cat was the hard one to deal with.
Yes, I have two cats of my own, and our morning routines are very similar at my house as they are with yours as well. Nothing happens in my house until the cats have breakfast and are given attention. That is
exactly.
I wanted to ask you, so you've lived in Silicon Valley, and I feel like those of us that haven't been to California or don't know much about that part of the country hear that term all the time. So what is something about Silicon Valley that you think people don't understand or misunderstand or don't quite get about that area of California?
The one thing that struck me being here is the melding and diversity. When I'm in Oklahoma, it's different now because the fort has really grown and taken over. So you get to see a rainbow of faces nowadays. But 20, 30 years ago, it was only, a couple different colors or diversity that you would see in Oklahoma. Here in California, every color of the rainbow is out there in terms of people and attitudes, and we meld. And for the most part, everybody respects each other's differences. I love that aspect about California. I know growing up in Oklahoma, you were either Indian or you were white. And, I always think back to probably when I was about 12 years old, I went into Lawton. We were on the outskirts and more in the country of Oklahoma, outside of Lawton. And Lawton had brand new Sears. So I went with my grandpa to Sears, and he was thirsty. So I was asking where the water fountain was. And this sales clerk looks at my grandfather and me and says, the water hose is out back. And that was early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Not that long ago.
Yeah.
Nothing like that would happen in California.
Interesting.
So I think that a lot of people, they talk the fruits and the nuts. You know what? The fruits and nuts are all living happily together. Yeah. And I like that. I'm looking at the last stage or chapter of my life, and all I want to do is be happy. So I want to surround myself with happy people and happiness.
Oh, but very well said. Very well said. Well, Donna Rowell, thank you for being on the author hot seat. You did a great job. Thanks for answering those somewhat fun but somewhat silly questions. We appreciate it. And I wanted to go back to your book for just a second. We were talking earlier about sort of the tight time frame and how that's so unique in mysteries and thrillers today, especially. I want to ask you about red herrings because you've got several of those in your book, and we won't give too many away because we don't want to spoil that. But was there a red herring that you created that you thought, oh yeah, this is really going to take readers in a different direction? And was it hard to kind of work that into a timeline that takes place in less than 24 hours?
It's funny is I'm not quite sure I could write in something that takes place more than 24 hours. I think one of the advantages of keeping it so brisk and in Oklahoma in the backcountry is, of course, I don't have to deal with technology and DNA and fingerprints and everything like that. This happens too quickly for all that to go on. But yeah, there's a couple of red herrings I threw in there, and I thought, okay, this will throw them off. And then it's a delight. I love hearing from readers when they catch something. And or like for example, I make mention there's a scene where Mud is going through a gallery and she's looking at these beautiful paintings from the Kiowa 5, and then she talks about this one painting from C.E. Rowell. I get and I get a message from on my social. Oh, I just read it. I know what your grandpa in this. So I love putting little things like that in there, as well as knowing, will they catch this red herring or not.
Terrific. That's terrific. And so, Donna, as readers get to the end of your book, when they kind of turn the last page and close the back cover, what is something or a couple of things that you hope they take away from the time and experience of reading your book?
I hope they understand who the Kiowas are. And one of my responsibilities is sharing Kiowa stories and not letting us be forgotten. I feel I owe that to the tribe and to my grandparents. So it was important to me for them just to know a little bit about the Kiowas, and that we're people that are still here today. And then also, I just hope they had fun. I want it to be a fun read that, you can I love a read I lose myself into. I'm so hoping that if I can capture one or two people that lose themselves into my story, learn a little bit about the Kiowa tribe, and go away thinking, I might go visit Oklahoma, then I feel very successful.
Excellent. Well, I was one of those readers. I got lost in the story, and I had a list of things I needed to do the day I started reading your book, and none of them got done because I was so engrossed in the story. I had to finish it and find out what happened. But yes, I love the parts about Kiowa culture. I just feel like that all the things we think we know about Native Americans and that part of the country and their experiences, you don't really know it all, and other than maybe what you've learned in school or been taught by someone else or seen in the media or whatever. And so I think you really pull the curtain back a little bit and let us see what life is like through these great characters of Mud and Denny and the elders that are in your story, and knowing that that's connected back to your life makes it all that more special. So my last question to you is: you hinted that this is the first book that Never Name the Dead is the first book in a 4-part trilogy, sort of trilogy plus one. we're never good at math. That's why we write, I guess. But, trilogy plus one story. So where are you on book 2, and when might we expect that to come out, that to be released?
Book 2 is actually with my editor, so I'm hoping to get last edits done this month. Our goal is to have book 2 out in October of next year. What is that, 2023? And then I started book 3 once and tossed away the 7 chapters, and now I've restarted it. So I've got book 3 happening at this point. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm going to get all 4 books done, and that there's enough readers that want to hear all the 4 days of her vision quest. You mentioned the cover, and I just have to say, Crooked Lane, thank you very much. They're the experts, and they're the ones that came up with the cover that really is a nice mystery book look, and the name for the book. I originally was calling it My Name is Mud, and they said, I like the name a lot, but it doesn't come off as a mystery book. So they actually took words from within the book, and that's how they came up with the Never Name the Dead.
Very good. Well, it's a beautiful cover, and as I mentioned earlier, it is a beautiful cover for a beautiful story that has so much about culture and Kiowa culture, but at its core, it is a true mystery, a true murder mystery with some fantastic characters and plenty of red herrings. It's just amazing. I loved it. I learned so much about culture. Like I said, I got lost in the story. I think anybody that picks up a copy will as well. The title of the book we've been talking about and we've been taking a page break with today is called Never Name the Dead. Our guest has been Donna Rowell. She's got a cover of the book right there. It's got the book in her hand with the cover. You've got to buy the book just for that cover, folks. Look at that. How awesome is that cover? So I hope that as you were thinking about your Christmas shopping list for someone in your reading circle, if it's not yourself, maybe someone else who loves mysteries and thrillers, be sure you pick up a copy of Donna's book. It's terrific. Donna, congratulations to you on your first book, Never Name the Dead. And let's have you back on in October of next year and talk about book 2. What do you say?
Let's do that. Let's plan on that. That sounds great, Elliot. And thank you so much. Thank you
my
so much.
pleasure. Thank you so much.